I think we need to do the intro first, right?
You said we were just going to shoot the shit.
Well, we still have to like say what we're talking about today, right?
Like, what do you think shooting the shit is?
On today's episode, we're discussing Brian De Palma's 1987 film, The Untouchables, starring Robert De Niro as famous gangster Al Capone. Do you have anything to add to that intro?
I mean, no. I think it's interesting that we're watching another Brian De Palma film so soon. And, it has, I think, some divergences, some meaningful divergences from Greetings. But, it's kind of... cut from the same cloth as a lot of 60s or 70s and 80s era De Niro gangster films, which is fun.
I think that makes sense.
And I'm really looking forward to discussing it.
Because it is an 80s De Niro gangster film.
Well, I use the word other. So.
Okay, yeah, okay. Specificity is the soul of narrative. I mean, I think we've already mentioned during the Greetings episode that neither of us have much exposure to Brian De Palma's filmography. And obviously this isn't a Brian De Palma podcast, but it seems like we're going to watch a bunch of his movies. So, that's cool. And this is certainly, not to get into final thoughts just yet, but I certainly liked it more than Greetings. So...
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited to talk about this one.
It was great to watch a good movie. That's kind of the way that I felt about this. Like, wherever our ratings... end up shaking out. I liked it, and I'm guessing you liked it too.
And what's nice...
I don't think either of us have liked the other two movies we've watched so far for this podcast.
Yeah, what's cool about this, so just to set the stage, obviously this is, I'm sure, the most popular film out of the three that we've watched so far. But this is a 1987 crime film directed by Brian De Palma and written by David Mamet, which I thought was super cool. He also wrote at least one other Robert De Niro film, Ronin, which I absolutely love. So,
love Ronin.
So I was excited going into this when I was like reading about the film. We have an ensemble cast. We have Kevin Costner, Charles Martin Smith, Andy Garcia, Sean Connery, of course, Robert De Niro. And this is a film that's set in Chicago in 1930 and basically follows Elliot Ness, played by Kevin Costner, as he forms the Untouchables team to bring Al Capone, played by De Niro, down. And so this is another one of those films where De Niro's in more of a minor supporting role, but, is really great in the time that he has. So you want to just get into it?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds great. What I'm thinking about is as we kind of discuss this in relation to the kind of two films that we watched prior to it, Greetings as Brian De Palma's first film with Robert De Niro, and Ezra as Robert De Niro's most recently released on-screen credit. This is such a funny thing. I don't think so. I wasn't able to find any information about this online, and I haven't gone through and counted or anything. But I would be surprised if De Niro had meaningfully more screen time in this movie than he had in Ezra. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
He's such a central character to the narrative, but he's talked about by the other characters, almost as a foil for them, or really as a plot device more than anything. I think for the character of Ness and for the whatever statement De Palma and Mamet are trying to make about morality and America, and we'll get into all that stuff. But I think it's funny that we've seen so little De Niro screen time in the past 2 weeks of the pod.
Yeah, we're due for a meaty, some De Niro meat. Give me that De Niro meat.
Yeah, and Meet the Parents next.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, meet MEAT the Parents. Yeah, that's actually the XXX parody of that film. Yeah, I know. Meet the Fockers, very easy to parody that title. I think let's get into it. I'm excited to do this recap. Just to kind of like, go behind the scenes a little bit. I'm standing for this. I'm at my standing desk. I was like, I'm standing at attention for The Untouchables. I'm going to see how that feels. We'll see if I feel like adjusting and sitting down at some points. But
sure.
This
I'm
film,
sitting down.
You watched more recently than me. You watched this morning, and I watched a couple days ago.
Yeah, I finished it about 2 hours ago.
Oh, fantastic!
So it was very recent.
Yeah, yep. I took copious notes.
Did I?
Yes,
Yep.
I think we both learned our lesson from last time. Getting into this movie, it starts with an opening title sequence. Oh, Enrico Morricone, am I saying his name right? He did the soundtrack here.
I think that maybe the final E is spoken.
Morricone?
Yes, it is. It's Morricone. Yep.
Okay. Hey, my
That's
bad.
okay.
I do that all the time.
We're probably going to see more films scored by him, so you're learning now.
It's good. It's good. As long as I learn from my mistakes, it's how we grow as people. He does the soundtrack, and it is, I mean, it's a character in the film. It is overt. It is noticeable. It is strong. Yeah. And so we have this opening title sequence where, the only things that I noted here were that Armani did the wardrobes for the film, which was great. I thought they all looked all the costumes were really good. Yeah. And of course, it was written by David Mamet. Very exciting.
Can I interject something here really quick?
I won't stop you if you do.
You do notice, right, the costuming very early. I think in particular, you mentioned the score being a costume or being a character in its own way. I think the costumes are also a character in a way. They are so evocative of the time. It's a period film. I think it works relatively well as a period film. And, I find the costuming incredibly striking. It's something that I really loved about it. And I was reading this morning after I finished that De Niro actually focused on this as a main part of his development for the role. We can talk about this more as we go on, but this is a bit of an odd, like, kind of method acting piece on the part of De Niro, considering how small the role is. We can talk more about kind of the ways that he embodied the role as he prepared and did his performance ultimately. But my understanding is that he actually got quite a bit of attention from Armani, specifically on putting together a wardrobe that was really authentic to the way that Capone dressed. And I find that dedication to what I can't imagine was more than 10 minutes of screen time. It's very interesting. Just a very interesting expression of what De Niro is like as an actor. We talked about this in the quiz, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's like his commitment to his roles, I think, was what I chose, is what I love the most about him.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we open up on this overhead shot of this guy being pampered. He's being, shaved and manicured. He has people attending to him, and a reporter walks up to him. We see a title card. It's 1930. It's the era of Prohibition, the time of gang lords and Al Capone. And we get this full face reveal of Robert De Niro right around the 3-minute, 30-second mark. So De Niro Nation, that one's for you. And, he has very thin hair. He's like obviously costumed up. He looks different for this role than he normally does. And the reporter's, kind of jokingly asking, oh, why aren't you officially the mayor of Chicago? Because you basically are already. And asks Capone about his alleged use of violence. And Capone, obviously denies that. He's playing the game. He says, oh, I grew up in a tough neighborhood and I don't use violence. And then we immediately cut to this scene. It's like we start out at this exterior underneath a bridge and we push into this like bar. And we're inside the bar. This guy talks to the bartender. It seems like the guy doesn't want to pay like extortion money or something like that. It's some, refusing the advances of this gangster basically. And so the guy, the goon, the guest, he like walks out of the bar and he leaves his briefcase in there. And this little girl who's in the bar for some reason, maybe she's like the bartender's
I think.
What?
No, I thought it was a pharmacist.
Was it a pharmacist? I don't fucking know what it was.
Yeah, I read it as like an old-timey like druggist.
Gotcha.
And like she was there picking up something for her mother. Okay. That was my interpretation.
Well, she picked the wrong day.
You wouldn't expect a bar to be open that time of day.
I don't fucking know.
I don't know.
I guess it wouldn't be a bar because it's the era of Prohibition. So yes.
Oh, and that's true. That too, right? Yeah, we're you know what? We're listening and learning.
And I want to just one piece of trivia at the very top here. I want to make it clear that this apparently, like the story in this film is like almost completely disconnected from real events. So this is not how it went down in real life. This is like almost entirely fictional. I was going to note
this as well.
It's been noted.
Totally fictionalized.
We noted it. Yeah. So the girl, she grabs the briefcase and she starts to run outside yelling, "Oh, mister, you forgot your briefcase." And spoiler alert, that shit was a bomb and that kid explodes. Like that entire building is blown up by that suitcase bomb and the goon drives off with his accomplice. I thought that was a very audacious way to start this film. Like you're under no pretense. Like after the first 2 minutes, like, no, like this is really nasty business. Which is interesting. Like this movie makes me want to, it made me want to read more about the Prohibition movement. It's such an interesting era in American history. And like, I don't know, like, I think people, adults should be allowed to drink alcohol. But it's crazy that it escalated to this point of like, violence and bombings and this and that, this whole, smuggling operation.
Yeah, it is interesting. Yeah.
So then
but I don't think it's quite unlike, the kind of markets and environments and structures that spring up around any kind of contraband, right? I mean, look at, the cross-border drug trade and everything that's going on with gangs in Mexico and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's not here, right? But, you know, the banning of a product that the public wants to consume, I think, creates a black market with all the lawlessness that comes with that. You know, it's a relatively common phenomenon.
Yeah. So then we cut to this house. The calendar says it's September 15th, 1930. And there's this woman who's, writing a little a kind note and putting it into a lunch bag, hands it to her husband. They're in a nice,
tasty carrots.
Oh, absolutely. The man is reading a headline about the explosion, the kid exploding and this beer war that's occurring. And we see that the guy is Elliot Ness, played by Kevin Costner. We'll talk more about his performance. I thought everyone in this film was great. I really enjoyed the performances.
So agree.
Kevin Costner, he's the main character. This is really his film, and he's leading the ensemble, and I thought he was fantastic. I enjoy Kevin Costner. Love him. Yeah, so good presence. He's good in the role. Interesting seeing him as a younger man like that. We cut to
he looks quite different.
He does, yeah.
He's aged not poorly. I think he's still a very handsome man. I've watched Yellowstone. You haven't.
I was going to say I haven't seen Yellowstone.
He's aged, I think, maybe differently than you would have expected him to, looking at him in the mid to late 80s. It's interesting. I almost didn't recognize him.
Time makes fools of us all. So we cut to a press conference, and so we see that Ness, he's a special agent of the Treasury Department, and basically he's been tasked with working with the Chicago police to create a program to deal with the illegal liquor trade. And so he meets Lieutenant Alderson of the flying squad, and he basically meets, he goes into this room with a few dozen cops in uniform, and basically tells them okay, while you're on this task force, I understand that you probably imbibe every now and then, you enjoy a drink, but while you're doing this, while you're working with me, I want you to stop drinking altogether. You need to adhere to the letter of the law. He seems like kind of a fucking drag. If I'm being honest, I was oh, this guy seems he just seems like such a stick. Obviously he's a really good, morally upstanding guy, but come on, man. It's such a dumb law.
Let's interject here, because I do want to talk about this, right?
You can just interject.
This is part of, I know, but I want to interject with something more thematic. This is, I think, I don't know, it's an interesting quality of this movie, right? It's pretty amoral, in a way that I think is really interesting. We talked about it being really fictionalized, right? I don't know much about Elliot Ness. I skimmed his Wikipedia article after finishing the film this morning. Seems like an interesting guy. I don't know how authentic a representation of kind of just who he was as a man this is, given how fictionalized the plot is overall. But I agree. He seems like a real stick in the mud. And what's really interesting is his entire vantage point seems to be to uphold the law, regardless of the valence or quality of the law that he's upholding. And that I think has some tension. I think some interesting tension with his primary motivation from an emotion and sentiment perspective, which seems to be creating an orderly, lawful world for his family, to protect his daughter and his wife. He didn't actually have any kids in real life. Certainly not when this was happening. Okay. He adopted a child later, so that's completely fictionalized. But I do find the character of Ness interesting, because what is his perspective? Right. We'll talk about this as you go through the recap. I think we're supposed to understand as viewers that he goes on an emotional and ideological journey over the course of this film, and I just don't necessarily see it.
Yes, and I think for
continue.
The sake of context, I think it's also important to note this film, it's just under 2 hours long. So I think this is going to come up as we, eventually reach our conclusion and talk more about the movie overall. But I think that it's not as long as you might expect this sort of gangster crime, saga epic to be. And I think that there's good things and bad things about that. So after that, we see Ness talking to a cop outside. It's nighttime. They're in an alleyway. Ness, he's on a stakeout and he sees the note from his wife, very cute, talking about being married, whatever. And they see this guy moving and it's very tense. They get into a chase and it turns out it's just a reporter with a camera. Very, very moody. I loved the lighting here. I made a note of the cinematography. It's a really dramatic looking film and I really enjoyed that, especially just in this era of like modern studio films that are also flatly lit and like, they just all look so same and muddy and sludgy. I really enjoyed just like, give me the dramatic lighting, give me the Brian De Palma split by diopter shots. That was great. So we like, we follow
a lot of great cinematography in this film. It's really special.
So we follow Ness and his crew, like an armored truck drives into a warehouse where they suspect that there's an illegal, trade happening. They bust in, there's a shootout. It's crazy. A lot of commotion. Ness breaks open a crate thinking that he's found some illegal liquor. And he's like telling the reporter, like, get ready with your camera. He cracks it open. And the only thing that's inside is an umbrella. So they got some bad intel. They were fed some bad intel, and Ness is embarrassed publicly. It's like in the newspapers. It's not.
I thought this was really interesting. I don't really understand this part. Like, why does he let the reporter in? It seems like he was going off book to do that. Like, I can't imagine that's protocol to let a reporter join like a raid, like a sting operation with potential.
Seems dangerous.
Violence. And he lets him in, and then it's like really embarrassing for him. Like, is he vain? I was trying to understand that. And then like throughout the film, I was trying to see things that would like kind of clue me into what it was about his character that motivated him to do that. It was just a little odd. Like, he doesn't seem vain, does he? But it's vanity that would make you do something like that.
I think he was naive. Because
naive.
Later in the film. So actually, I'll just get into the next part of this film. So it's nighttime. It's after the raid. Ness is kind of just hanging out on a bridge, looking at a newspaper, about this embarrassment, and Sean Connery walks up to him. So Sean Connery plays a beat cop. And I want to just comment on Sean Connery's performance in this film. I loved seeing him. I haven't seen a Sean Connery film in a very long time, so it was just great like seeing him on screen. But man, he makes no attempt to hide his accent or like he's just playing Sean Connery as a beat cop. And I honestly kind of loved it. What did you think about his performance? Because he's a major supporting character in the film. It was great.
I loved it. I mean, I think that he's supposed to, the accent matches. Right. Like, I understand that it like made it easy for him because he's not like doing anything to mask his natural accent. But I thought it worked with the character. Right.
Yeah.
So I thought it was fine. I loved him. I love that character. I'm excited to talk about him more. I think he's incredibly compelling. Maybe the most compelling thing about the film, I think, is Sean Connery's character to me.
Yeah, in his notes, he was like, listen, tell Brian De Palma I'll do this film, but I'm not going to change my fucking accent for this. And so they have a little bit of an antagonistic meeting. Sean Connery, he learns that, Ness's occupation and everything. And we cut afterwards to this new scene of newspapers being delivered to a very ritzy hotel, obviously a very expensive, fancy place. The soundtrack here was like nuts in a good way. It was so bold. It was just like dominating, this montage of what was happening in this hotel. And we go up to the top into this like office and we see Capone's illegal, smuggling operation, just the, operating. And so Capone invites Eddie into his bedroom, and he has this crazy, lavish master suite. And De Niro, he does such a great De Niro face here that I like noted it. I was like, oh, this is really, he's just doing the mean mugging that he loves to do. And after that, so we get like a little bit of an establishing, like what is going on in his, world, the crime world. But, it's very quick. We're barely with De Niro, we're barely with Capone, and we're back in the police department because this is really a film about the formation of the Untouchables. So, Ness goes back in, he's embarrassed. One of the headlines is on, his office door. Everyone's quiet when he walks in. Like, it's not a good vibe. And he seems, really ready to kind of hang it all up already. Like, he's obviously very disillusioned. It didn't go the way that he expected it to. I think he thought it was going to be a pretty easy bust. And the mom of the exploded child walks into his office and basically like thanks him for, trying to stop these dangerous men, and correctly assumes that Ness has kids, which he does in this fictional narrative. And it's a very emotional movement, and it seems to, galvanize Ness into really wanting to pursue this and hunt this, hunt Capone down and like make him, pay justice. So
now I understand what you were saying when you reference naivete.
Yes.
So I think you and me are actually saying the same thing. Like, I think it's vanity that creates that naive attitude,
yes.
right? Like, it's his vanity. Like, he's like, oh, like, I'm smart. Like, this problem's not intractable. I'm going to come in and like, I'll just push some stuff around and I'll look at things a little bit differently. And I'm going to solve this problem that nobody else is able to solve.
Exactly.
So yeah, I think it's naive vanity. Yes. Like he thinks that there's something special about him and he's going to be able to solve this problem easily.
We got there. Yeah, no, I agree. So we see Ness, he's walking into an apartment building and he's popping in on Sean Connery. He's visiting him out of nowhere, and Ness basically gives him the "I'm putting together a team" speech. He wants Connery to work with him. Putting together a crew. That's right. Basically like I don't trust a lot of the cops in the Chicago PD because it's obviously dirty. You seem like a good cop. Like I trust you, and I want you to help me. Like really like do this. Get this going. And Connery declines, I think very reasonably because he's old and doesn't want to die. He basically is like, the reason I'm a beat cop, it's like I'm not dirty and like this is kind of like my punishment. It's just being a beat cop. But like I believe in justice, but I really don't want to like fucking die at 70 years old. So it seems like it's not going well, and that's kind of where we leave it.
Let me interject something.
You can just interject.
So I think shut the fuck up. I think that there's something implied about this character. At least that was my interpretation of it. And I was waiting for it to be addressed explicitly, but it never is. He's an older man, right? Like he's probably not 70.
No.
Like I think for somebody to still be even like alive and walking around like he is at 70 in the 1930s would have been a little bit unusual. Certainly to still be working, but he's an older man. He's toward the end of his career. My interpretation was, and I think this is borne out by some faces that Connery makes and some offhand comments and just his general sentimentality, that it wasn't just this like totally unemotional, like principled commitment to upholding duty and honor and not being corrupt. I don't know. I interpreted it as something happened to him that made him this way. Like maybe he lost a family member or someone he loved, like to corruption in some way that has made him not corrupt. He's always fingering that necklace that he wears, right?
Yes.
Like later on, there's a very meaningful scene, which we'll discuss, where Ness hands it to him. So that's my interpretation of the Connery character. And that's why, he, I think, was significantly more emotionally compelling to me than most of the other stuff in the film. Because I feel like there's more there. I kind of feel that way about Stone as well. Giuseppe Petri, is his birth name, the guy who's played by Andy Garcia.
Yeah.
Like it seems like there's something there that's not made explicit in the text. And I think that's like strong, brave storytelling. It's something I really liked about the script, that it makes you think like these characters have like rich interior lives and like it will not be stated. Like it's up to your interpretation as a viewer. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I definitely felt that with Connery. He lives alone, I guess is important to note. And so, there seems to be this implied sort of backstory or history or sort of pain that informs the character in a good way. So after that meeting, we get a little bit more time with Ness and his wife and daughter, and has this very nice pleasant existence with them. They're listening to the radio about this smuggling issue. And then we kind of, go back to Ness in his office, and there's a guy working at his desk, this little, shrimpy kind of guy, I guess is how I would describe him. Kind of a nerd, if you will, big, thick glasses, kind of stocky frame, small guy. This is Oscar Wallace. So Ness meets him, and Wallace, he's an accountant. And he's basically saying, like, I have an idea for how we can take Capone down. Ness is like, sure, hit me. And he's like, Capone hasn't filed a tax return in 4 years. He owes like $3 million in back taxes or something like that. And so like we could just get him for that. And Ness is not interested. He's like, really, as a matter of principle, he's like, why would I bring this guy down for tax? I want to bring him down for like all of the, like, I don't know, heinous crimes he's committed. And Ness like walks out. He doesn't really like pay any attention to this line of thought or to Wallace. So Connery and Ness, they meet Connery. What was Connery's? It doesn't matter. I'm calling him Connery. Sean Connery and Ness.
It's Malone.
Malone. Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
I'll
Jimmy
probably
Malone,
forget
yep.
that. Jimmy Malone. A famous Irish 70-year-old man, Jimmy Malone. And so they go to a church to talk because it's outside of the precinct. You know, they know it's like there are a lot of dirty cops there. And Connery, and this also has to do with my interpretation of Ness being naive. Connery asks Ness, like, are you really ready for this fight? Like, it's going to get ugly. It's going to be violent. Like, you need to be ready to kill. And like, you know, like, are you ready to lay it all on the line like that? Like, to have you and your men potentially be killed in this. And there's a really cool split diopter shot there, which is really cool. Classic, like, Brian De Palma technique. No one does it quite like him. And, you know, Ness affirms that he's ready for this. So he, like, really seems like ready to take this on. So they're walking outside. You know, we cut to them going to the shooting range, and this is basically the recruitment phase. They're looking for new recruits, and Ness explicitly wants unmarried men in his crew. You know, someone with no attachments, someone who, you know, wouldn't leave a wife or kids behind or anything like that. And they interview a couple of different people. And the first one, he can barely string a sentence together, and he's very uncomfortable and nervous. And they go, okay, it's not this guy. And then we meet George Stone, who you mentioned already, played by Andy Garcia. And he's a prodigy shot. You know, we see him at the shooting range, and he's just like, boom, headshot, boom, headshot. I'll throw that sound clip in. And they talk to him, and Connery is like really antagonistic to him. He's like openly racist towards Stone.
A lot of anti-Italian racism.
Oh yeah, really.
Definitely something that I remarked.
I mean, it was 1930. You know, it's crazy to think about how recent that was. And they have a little, you know, antagonistic back and forth. And then Connery's like, you're all right, man. You're all right. And they recruit him, and like, okay, the team is like being formed. It's happening. I love this shit. I'm such a sucker for like, I love crime movies. I love the putting together a crew, like all that sort of stuff. Like, these are tropes that I really enjoy seeing in movies, especially when they're like well done.
It's really fun.
Yeah, it's just fun.
Yeah, I agree. And it is very well done here. It's very fun. It's really cool.
Yeah. And so we're in Ness's office, and like, it's go time. Like, it's getting real. And the gang is in there, all of the Untouchables. They don't have their name yet, but like the whole group is in there. Ness, Stone, Wallace, and Connery comes in, and he basically says, like, I have intel, like actionable intel. We're going on a raid. And he's like handing shotguns to people. And he asks Wallace, like, are you a cop or like whatever? And he's like, do you have a badge? And Wallace is like, yeah. And so Connery hands him a shotgun, and they go on their way. So like, this is it. The group is going middle of the freaking day. They walk into a post office, and Connery's like, if we do this, there's no turning back. It's going to get ugly. And Ness is like, okay, like, we're doing this. So they bust into this door that had a sign like do not enter or whatever. And there's just a massive smuggling operation happening in there. And, you know, there's a shootout, there's chaos. It's crazy. But like, it was a successful raid. Like they got the contraband, and like they're feeling really high off the hog. Like they're really excited about this. They go out to dinner afterwards. They're celebrating. The reporter comes in and takes a group picture of everyone. And he's like, you know, you can't publish it, but like, we want this picture for ourselves. And so it's like a really nice moment. You have the group just like celebrating and hanging out.
Big chillin'. Yep.
So we cut in on Capone, and he's wearing a tux. He's in some fancy, I don't know, ballroom or something. There's a giant circular table, and there's just like, it seems like all of his kind of crime underbosses or goons. I refer to them as goons in my notes. They're all hanging out at this fancy...
There's too many of them to not be goons, I think. I think this is a little bit unrealistic, that he's at dinner with so many people. That's not how racketeering works, you know? Yeah,
I agree. And it's one of these very tense scenes where, like, you know something bad's about to happen.
Yeah, the scene was really fun. De Niro was really good in this scene. I love this one.
It's so good. He just has this long, like, this monologue talking about how life goes on, and he's whatever, yada, yada-ing, and he makes a baseball analogy and picks up a baseball bat that's there for some reason. Not really sure who brought a baseball bat to this swanky event, but, like, you know, because he's, like, tapping the bat on the floor while he walks around and, like, says his speech. He's like, oh, he's going to do something pretty bad very, very soon. And for whatever reason, he, like, just beats one of his goons to death, just like hits him over the back of the head with the baseball bat until there's like a pool of blood on the table and everyone's uncomfortable and quiet.
Let me add some context here. This is always fun. It's always fun to watch movies with you when you miss things like this.
Oh my God.
So it wasn't just for some reason, right? And it wasn't just some random goon. The goon he kills is the warehouse manager whose warehouse had been raided by the Untouchables.
Gotta pay the price.
So it's like it's retribution, and I think it's also like he's making an example of him.
It's a signal, yeah.
And I don't think the baseball bat was there by happenstance. I think he probably brought it because he knew he was going to do this. Like, I don't think it's just like, oh well, I want to do like a vicious scary murder. Oh, it's a good thing there's a baseball bat here. Like, I think we're supposed to understand it to have been premeditated.
Do you think the goons noticed that when they were like sitting down in their spots for dinner? They're like, ooh, the baseball bat's here. That is not good. It's like, I mean,
we hate when the baseball bat's here.
Right. I'm excited for the steak, but I really hope I don't get my head bashed in by this baseball bat. So
we all hope that.
So we cut back to Ness, and he's, living this incredibly morally pure life. He's literally watching his wife like pray with his daughter before the daughter's bedtime, just to get those little moments of like his home life, and obviously seeing what he stands to lose in this war. We go back to the police department, and Ness is excited because he got a good headline in the paper about the raid. Like, he's excited about this. And Wallace makes the case for the second time, like, hey, we can still go after Capone for the taxes. That seems like a really good way to get him. But Ness is still not interested. He's like, he's excited about the way this is progressing. And this guy walks.
Just to add here, in case you're not aware, and in case listeners aren't aware, Wallace is based on a real person. Who actually was the one who led the IRS investigation against Capone, but he was never part of the Untouchables.
Okay.
So they're kind of merging together the two kind of threads along which he was investigated and eventually convicted with the character of Oscar Wallace. The guy's name who he was based on is Frank Wilson.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Oscar Mayer for some reason.
Delicious hot dog.
Oh yeah, of the bologna fortune. Yeah,
wrap that in a paper towel and toss it in the microwave. That's gonna be a delicious snack.
30 seconds, man. I really liked all of the characters in this film. It's one of the reasons why I think the film worked so well. And Wallace is a great example of that because he's played as like, the nerd kind of like comic relief.
Like a little bit of a Poindexter,
exactly. That's a great way of putting it. He's like the classic Poindexter kind of archetype. And it's great. You get the different personalities on the team. It's a nice, small, intimate group. Like I really did enjoy that. Like everyone there was given a great performance. It was really great, like spending time with this crew, the Untouchables. And so this goon comes in and basically is like, talks to Ness, and Ness sends everyone else out. And the guy, like, he congratulates Ness, but he's really like warning him. He's like, you should really leave things alone. Like, you should not pursue this any further, like just for your own sake. And Ness gets pissed off at him, kicks the guy out. He's like, go tell your boss like to fuck off, basically. And, we go back to Ness's home life. And it's just I
think that this guy's supposed to be some sort of official, just so you know. He's not a goon. He's like a crooked, like alderman, I think, which, is like Chicago's got a unique municipal governance structure, right? The wards each have aldermen. So I think he's supposed to be like a pretty important figure in the city government who's like coming as a representative of Capone. It's supposed to demonstrate like how deep the corruption goes.
He's a crooked cop.
Everybody's a crooked cop, huh?
Yes, exactly. It's like a crooked like vice mayor, like pretty serious.
Yeah, and there's a harsh juxtaposition because we cut from that, kind of like thinly veiled threat to Ness being back at home with his family again. It's his daughter's, he's walking home at night with his daughter's birthday present. And so it's like, you're like, okay, like we're getting closer to this war coming home for him.
Worlds converging.
Exactly.
Right, yeah,
worlds are colliding. And you see, I called this guy Main Goon in my notes, but you see, I didn't know his fucking name. There are too many characters. So Main Goon, he's like he's sitting in a car just watching Ness's house from outside. And he basically he threatens Ness and his family. And then he just drives away. He just rushes off. So Ness freaks the hell out and he rushes into his house. The family is okay, but he has his family taken away. Obviously, like you can't keep them in that house because I don't know, they might get fucking killed. We've already blown up children in this film. So it kind of that was such an audacious way to start the film, but it was so great for setting the stakes that oh no, nothing is sacred here. Right. The kid could die.
Rules.
Yeah. Nothing is. Yeah, exactly. Yep. So the cops, the Untouchables, they all meet. Oh yeah, and that's where we get the name Untouchables from because the alderman guy was like, oh, you guys think you're untouchable or whatever. So the Untouchables all meet up on the street in the middle of the night. Ness is pissed off. They get on an airplane and they're like flying to some unknown location. And Wallace tells him again, he's like, we could do the taxes thing. I'm just saying, taxes. And Ness is like, shut the fuck up. I'm trying to sleep, bro. On the world's loudest plane. I don't know how you could possibly do it, but he managed. And so we cut to where we're in the mountains. It's daytime. We're at the northern border. We're at the Canada border. And the Untouchables, very cool shot. I was like surprised it became a fucking Western here. They're on horses at the top of a mountain, and they're basically scoping out this location where an illegal deal is supposed to occur, like at this bridge right at the border. So they're scoping it out. They have this like little rustic cabin nearby that they're like, just like a shack. It's very quaint that they're holed up in. And so later in the day, it's going down. And we see this car stop on the bridge and a guy with a Tommy gun, because it's the 30s. We get fun Tommy guns. He gets out, waves a white flag. He's indicating that, it's safe. And another car drives out. A handful more goons come out. Like, it's happening. It's going down. On the other side, 4 freaking trucks drive up. This is like legit shit. I was like, oh, this is like a major freaking deal. And the Untouchables are watching, and Connery literally says, he goes, shoot to kill. Listen, we are not playing around at this point. This is the 30s.
Yep.
We're not dealing with Miranda rights and shit. Like, we're murking these people. And by freaking coincidence, the Mounties, they start shooting their guns like fucking Yosemite Sam. And they're shooting their guns, and the music is popping off, going crazy in the soundtrack, and they're riding in on their horses as the Untouchables are riding up on their horses. Doesn't seem like they were coordinated on this. And like all of a sudden it devolves into chaos.
I'm pretty sure they were coordinated, right? I didn't write down exactly what was said, but my interpretation of the scene was that the Canadians and the Untouchables were coordinating, but the Canadians went faster than the Americans thought they were going to. Because early in the scene, doesn't maybe Ness remark to one of the other Untouchables or something that they need to make sure they send some signal or something because the Canadians won't move until they see the signal? Doesn't he say something like that?
Maybe.
I could have rewinded and listened, but that was my interpretation of the scene, was that they'd known they were there and they'd intended to coordinate, and they did not coordinate. That the Canadians went before they expected them to, and that kind of fucked up the whole deal.
Yeah, they were a little premature. It happens to the best of us sometimes. It's incredible that I took 1,600 words worth of notes on this film and still managed to miss things. But here we are. This is what you get with me doing the recap. So it devolves into utter chaos. It's like a full-blown firefight. Capone's goons are there trying to get away. It's a full-blown shootout. People are dying left and right. Wallace, this is crazy. We got to give Wallace his due, because he rolls up like the fucking Doom guy. He has his shotgun and he is just blasting fools. He shoots the goons, like one of the goons' cars. He's just walking up on these goons and he's just like popping them off left and right. Like, he is taking them out. He runs out of ammo. This shit was so fire. He runs out of ammo, so he runs up to one of the goons and just beats him with his shotgun. It was so cool. And then he takes a sip of whiskey that was leaking out of a barrel. It was like great. It's like, that's what you want in this sort of movie. It's like the Avengers is like such a great example of this. Like, you got to give every character like their moment to shine,
But it's important to note that the reason why this happens, it creates symmetry with a moment later in the film, right? And I think it's more like character development of the people. He goes full like Judge Dredd because Stone is shot. Like, it's like he's exacting like angry vengeance on their opponents. So
it's the wrath of Wallace.
I think that's fun. Like, right. I think that's what galvanizes him into that action, is like seeing his friend get hurt. I thought that was really nice.
He went sicko mode. He went Doom guy mode. It's got to be fun to get a little taste for like oh, I can legally kill people. Oh shit. Daddy wants a taste. So after that, a goon makes it into the house and Ness gets him, blasts him. So I think this is the guy that he kills. He kills one guy who's like corpses outside of the shack, and then they manage to capture another goon. So this goon has the ledger, like the smoking gun, but it's coded, so they can't translate it without the bookkeeper. So Connery, he's punching the guy. he wants to use some enhanced interrogation techniques on this goon, and sticks a gun. And this, I thought this was a really great moment. I thought this was clever. This is what you get when David Mamet's writing the script. So he goes outside, and the goon who's alive, who's captured, he doesn't know that the other goon is dead. So Connery bluffs. He pretends that the dead guy is still alive, and he like puts the guy up near the window and is like yelling at him as though he's trying to interrogate him. And he's like, "If you don't talk, I'm gonna blow your brains out." He puts the gun in the dead guy in the corpse's mouth, and like the goon who's alive sees Connery like blow the freaking corpse's head off.
Boom, headshot! Boom, headshot! Boom, headshot!
And so then the guy is willing to talk. Very, very smart play by Connery. He knows what he's doing. He's been around the block. I wonder if he's ever had to do that in his beat cop days. Just like, "Yeah, I just caught you jaywalking. I'll blow your fucking brains out if you do that again. You need to respect the letter of the law." I can't do a good Connery.
I also loved this part.
Oh, it's so good.
And I think that the intensity of his emotion and the violence, I think, is another thing that I read as indicating like he's got some personal stake.
Yes.
That's not stated explicitly. And
I think
that's all just
I
so
think it's
cool.
I think that's a good interpretation, and even the Mounties are like, "We really don't agree with your methods here."
Right, like,
it was intense
insane,
for that. Yeah,
right?
exactly. Like you're just like blowing corpses to bits and like torturing captured people. So after that, we get to revisit our dear friend Al Capone, and he's pissed. So he learns that the shipment was taken, and he does the classic villain. He's just like yelling, "I want Ness dead. I want everyone, all of them dead.
I want them all dead."
Exactly.
But in kind of the Tony Soprano accent, I mean, I saw The Sopranos obviously before I saw this film, but I feel like this performance must have been such an inspiration for James Gandolfini. Like you can really see the through line from like this Al Capone performance by De Niro, and like so much of what Gandolfini did as Tony Soprano.
We've talked about this outside of the pod, but I just think about, I've never been a big TikTok user. The algorithm has never really worked for me. It's never really showed me anything that I've like cared to look at. And just the nature of the infinite short form video content doesn't really appeal to me. But like maybe a week ago, I just popped it open and realized the algorithm shifted to where and now it's very funny. It's like 50% of my algorithm is literally just clips from The Sopranos. Like I am in Sopranos talk, and it's so much fun. It's so much fun just like revisiting all those moments and hearing James Gandolfini breathe so heavily. Oh, it's such a blast revisiting that show.
Fucking internet.
It's the best.
But it's funny when you say that De Niro's performance here was obviously an inspiration for Gandolfini. Like I'm sure you're right. What I noticed when we like see De Niro and the way that he's made up, especially in the scene where he's wearing the tux, I thought, oh, this is the Penguin. Like he just looks like.
Oh yeah.
He looks like every version of the Penguin because he looks like kind of grotesque in a way. And I was like, oh,
I mean, yeah, I see that. I mean, for me, it's like I think. You really got one up on me now that, the second Batman movie's been delayed like 55 years.
Hell yeah.
But, I watched the Penguin miniseries a couple months ago on HBO, and I thought it was quite good. And I think Colin Farrell is doing an exceptional Tony Soprano impression in his performance as Oz Cobb, the Penguin.
Yeah.
So I see that connection as well. It's just like I see the stop at Tony Soprano more.
Yeah.
But I do think this is like a proto mobster. Like this is like an important proto mobster performance, I think, on De Niro's part. Like you can see a lot of influences in later, Italian American gangster fiction.
Yes. Yeah. So after that, we are at a press conference. And important detail here. Some time has passed, and Ness has a new son, John. So now he has two kids. Like the stakes just keep being raised. And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, doesn't seem like it's going to work out well for your family, but I'm hopeful. And so we have this press conference.
Pulling for you, buddy.
Yeah, we have this press conference, and they're announcing that they're going to go after Capone for the income tax thing. And so they have the detainee who can translate the ledger or whatever. They get it, Wallace brings him into an elevator, and it's just Wallace, the detainee, and this cop. But the cop is actually the main goon in disguise. He's wearing a cop outfit that he stole. And so oh, this is about to become really bad. So the elevator door closes, and main goon shoots the detainee and Wallace in the head, kills them both. And it was, it was really unfortunate. It was very sad. Like Wallace, I thought was a great character, and it was like very tragic that he died. And you see, I think it was I don't remember if it was the chief or the lieutenant, but it's like the head of the department. It seemed like we see him a couple of times, and it's we're able to infer that he is dirty, like he's like complicit in this stuff happening, but is like uncomfortable with it. Just I think the way in which it's escalated.
He's got some misgivings. Yeah. With what it's too late, right? Like once you're in, you can't get out. But like he seems to have some misgivings about like what he's made himself a party to with his corruption.
Yeah. So Ness and Connery, they hear the gunshot, so they're in pursuit of the main goon. They open the elevator door and they see the word "touchable" written on the elevator walls in blood. And, they see that Wallace is dead. They've kind of like lost everything that they had. And Ness is pissed. So the next day he does something that, I feel like it's the sort of thing that like, I don't know. It seems like the sort of impulsive thing that I would do that like you would have to like talk me down from. He walks into Capone's hotel and he like asks the front desk attendant, like, where the hell is Al Capone? Like he wants to like have that confrontation like right then and there. And Capone's walking down the stairs with his entourage of goons, and Ness walks up and like punches a goon. Capone walks down the stairs and like, they're about to fucking kill Ness, and like Connery runs in hot pursuit of Ness and like grabs Ness before Ness can pull his gun out, before like Ness, gets himself fucking, killed in a blaze of gunfire, and like literally like pulls Ness out of the building. He's like, we are not doing this here and now. It's like very intense scene. You can tell like they've reached this new level in the confrontation. And I thought it was interesting. So I want to make a comment about the length of the film, because it's only 2 hours long. And I like the brevity of it. It's really great to get like a whole ass story, this kind of story in 2 hours. However, I think that it was kind of, I kind of viewed it as a little bit of a negative, because I think if this was like a longer 2.5, 3 hour, crime epic, I think you would have had a deeper relationship or more moments where Ness and Capone like interacted. And this is really it. So you really just get like, okay, like Ness is super pissed. Obviously Capone's vindictive, and they nearly get into it, but it doesn't happen. But you don't get like Batman and the Joker having their long conversation about their ethics or their worldview or like whatever, the pushing. You don't get De Niro and Pacino sitting in the diner, talking about what's a normal life anyways, and like getting that deeper understanding of the character's motivations. And I think that it kind of worked against the film a little bit, because this is such a straightforward story. We'll get more into this in the kind of final reflections. But I think there was an opportunity there to deepen the understanding of the characters a bit beyond just Ness is good and morally pure and has a wife and kids, and Capone is, the penguin. It's just like, so after that,
it's really amazing when you and me agree about this. Like,
I love that.
I totally agree. I think this about movies more frequently than you do. This could use 30 more minutes. Like that's probably its deepest flaw,
right, because we disagree a lot about films, because I think it has to do more with modern films, but I often argue like this should have been shorter. Like I feel like it dragged on too long in some parts, and I think you semi-jokingly will say that, your attention span is too short, but it's like, no, it's just like, I don't know, sometimes
too much time on Sopranos talk.
Oh, I know. I'm just like my
dopamine deficiency.
My brain's fried. Listen, man, I just need to eat some gabagool.
Gabagool. Over here.
And get my brain working. So the Untouchables, they're back in Ness's house, the remaining Untouchables, and Ness, he wants to end it. He wants to throw in the towel. Like, blood has been shed. They lost Wallace. They lost their chance at convicting Capone, and he's very disillusioned. And Connery is the one who like pushes. And I think in a lot of ways Connery is like the moral center of the film in a way that makes him really compelling as a character. And he's the one who's like, no, like we started this. We need to finish this. And although it was never
said you were good.
Exactly. Like you, this is it. Like, this is what you said you were ready for. And it's too late to back down now. Like this is a war. And Connery reveals, it was never explicitly stated, but Connery reveals like, Ness, like I know you're married. Like I can infer that you're married. And So basically Connery's plan is to have Ness stall the DA while he works on something else that he doesn't want to reveal just yet. So Connery visits the chief or whoever that guy was, chief, the lieutenant, whoever that guy was who seemed uncomfortable with his, being a dirty cop, crooked cop. and he visits the chief at some like bar where a bunch of cops are hanging out, and he takes the chief outside, and they get into a big argument. They're in this, again, very dramatically lit back alley. It's raining. It's so moody. I loved it. And they get into a big argument, and Connery like threatens to rat out the chief, and the chief's like, "Are you fucking crazy, man? Like, I will fucking ruin your life. You're like already a fucking 65-year-old beat cop." And they get into a full-on brawl. Like, they get into a physical fight that it reminded me of the fight from They Live. You ever see that movie?
No, I never have.
So do you know anything about it?
No.
So it's a John Carpenter film where the main character gets into this like extended fight sequence in an alley with one of the supporting characters, and it's just like it plays out in real time. It's just like 5 minutes of these two dudes, just like middle-aged dudes, just like beating the shit out of each other. It's very funny. It's a great scene, but it's like it's definitely funny. So Ness, he's talking to the DA. He's stalling. We see this fantastic shot of Connery on a payphone with Stone, and Capone is talking to reporters. He's wearing the tuxedo, and that's where I noted he looks like the Penguin. And there's some tense music. We're kind of cutting back and forth here because this goon is looking inside at Connery, like in Connery's apartment. This is a new scene. So he's looking at Connery. He's like watching. You can tell like, oh, they're about to go after Connery's character. And
I thought it was funny in this scene, just so you know, like we just I noticed this as like something really silly and contrived about the movie. He seems really smart and like very like worldly, and like he's got a lot of street smarts. Would he really be just sitting directly, like framed perfectly within this window of his house? He was just threatened.
That's a really
like
good...
in the previous scene, like it's like he's obviously in danger. That read to me is a little bit silly. Like it's one of the few things in the film where I'm like, it's a little unbelievable. I don't know if I believe that character would do that.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that, but he does live on a first floor apartment and has the windows open.
Right. It's like, dude, I think
night.
he'd be
the
kind of
windows are
hunkered
open
down,
at
maybe
night,
chilling in the basement or like, yeah, like.
And so we get this really, really unique, really cool shot. So it's a first person view from the perspective of the goon who's like pursuing Connery. So it's so uneasy and so tense. And it's reminiscent of some shots that were in Blowout, which was De Palma's film from 81. And so you basically like are watching from the perspective of this guy as he, walks past Connery, sneaks past him, breaks into the apartment through the bathroom, and he's pursuing Connery, but he loses sight of him. And Connery, again, he's a smart guy. He knows what's happening here. Connery kind of gets the jump on him with his shotgun and chases the guy out. And Connery, to your point, seems like a smart guy, but he steps outside of the apartment, and there's a second goon just waiting there with a Tommy gun and just blasts the shit out of Connery. So Connery...
And that second goon, it's important, is the one you've been calling the main goon.
Right.
Whose name is Nitty. Frank Nitty.
Yeah, the main goon, he had Connery's address written on the inside of a matchbook. We see it like written on there. He uses it to light his cigarettes. So Connery's down. He's bleeding out. Opera starts playing because we're cutting back to Capone, who's like in a box at the opera, and we get this
that I really like is like opera and gangster movies.
It's so good. Yeah. So we're getting like the dramatic, opera singing and this juxtaposition as Connery's dying. So Ness arrives at Connery's apartment very quickly, and Connery tells Ness like the bookkeeper is on this specific train. And is he's struggling to get to his necklace, and the last thing that he says before he dies is he asks Ness, "What are you prepared to do?" So like this is it, like the stakes, like that we're losing the Untouchables. This is always a bummer for me in these sorts of films because like, listen, I understand it has to go this way for the sake of drama, but like I really love the first act of these sorts of films where we're just chilling with these characters and everything's.
Really do.
It's fun. Like I like the shooting.
So funny,
the shit.
like. You're always talking like this is like when we talk about The Sopranos and you talk about how you don't really like the later seasons because they're so depressing. It's like, yeah, of course it's more fun. Like when everybody's like fun and like having a nice time. Like that's like the point of the story.
Yeah, when I'm on Sopranos talk, I just want to see clips of the guys hanging out at Satriel's eating gabagool. I don't want to see all the depressing like, oh, Tony wants to, kill whatever character. No spoilers for The Sopranos, of course. This is not that sort of podcast. So like this is it. Like the stakes are at their highest. There are not many Untouchables left. They seem pretty touchable. And so Capone, we see him at the opera. He's drinking with the singer. He's having a great old time. And Ness and Stone, they're the last ones left in the Untouchables, and they're driving to catch this train. It's nearly midnight. The station's almost empty, and Ness, tells Stone, he's like, we need the bookkeeper alive. Like, whatever else happens, but like that guy has to be alive. And so they're watching for a while, and no one's coming in. They don't spot the guy. Like, nothing suspicious is happening. Train's about to leave in a few minutes. And this, such a crazy shootout. I'm excited to talk about this scene with you. So the dramatic tension in this, in what happens, it's because, it's the 30s and we didn't have a disability compliant architecture and elevators and stuff.
Yep.
So this woman, for some reason, is getting on a midnight train, or trying to, with her
18-month-old son, or however old he's supposed to
right,
be.
This 2-year-old son. This single mother, she has like 2 suitcases and a stroller with her baby, and she's trying to like push the stroller up this incredibly long staircase and bring her luggage, and like just can't even get up the first stair. And it's like, could you ask like an attendant to help you or something? Like, how did you think this was going to go for you? So Ness, because he's such a morally upstanding guy, he can't help but help this woman. So he runs down there and he's helping her, and he's very polite. And as he's like getting to the top of the stairs, he's still holding the stroller, but he clocks the bookkeeper and like some goons, and he's like, oh, like this is happening, like this is about to happen right now. And the woman's like, okay, thanks, like I'm good from here. And Ness is like so distracted, he's still holding the stroller. She's like, I can take it from here, and he's like not even like listening to her. And then it happens. So Ness turns around and just gets the jump on a goon, blasts him, boom, one goon's down. There's a lot more goons, and so it's a full-on firefight, and it was like total chaos. Were you going to say something?
Goon waterfall.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Don't go chasing waterfalls, man. And this almost felt like out of a John Woo movie or something. So him and Stone, like they're in this firefight, and the stroller with the baby, it's let go and starts rolling down the stairs. So like there's this tension because bullets are flying and bullets are whizzing past the stroller, and Ness is like yelling at the mom, like, don't run after it, like whatever. And it's this like crazy scene. Like, what an interesting creative choice to like, okay, a shootout at the train station. It's not dramatic enough. It's going to be pretty empty when it occurs. We got to like throw in a baby or something.
Yeah. This scene didn't work for me at all. How did you feel about this scene?
It worked for me because I feel like this movie operates in such a heightened space. I think I'm coming back to this moment again, but I really feel like, 'cause I didn't know anything about this movie beforehand except like the basic Wikipedia summary. And so I was so surprised by the audacity for like the film to blow up a 7-year-old kid within like the first 5 minutes that like, this to me, it felt like kind of cartoonish, but that's kind of like what I expected at this point. In some, like it didn't throw me off. It didn't seem outside the realm of possibility for like the world that had been created here. But I don't know. What about you?
It had nothing to do with the plausibility of it. I agree. Like it's no less plausible than a lot of the other like ridiculous theatrical things that happen in the film. It just really dragged on for me. Like the way that it was paced, I thought was so plotting and like overly deliberate, and it really cut for me like as this is like the climax of the film, right? Like it really cut a strong contrast to the other areas of the film. Like we can talk about this when we recap, right? But like the first point where I noticed like, oh, this could really be 20 or 30 minutes longer was when they cut to the Canadian border. I was like, oh, that felt abrupt. Like it really seemed like there maybe should have been like a little bit more preamble to this and like whatever, etc. And it's like there's all that. There's like 5 things like that in the first like 2 acts. And then in the third act, there's like 20 minutes for this train station scene and like the slow motion shot of like the baby like rolling down the stairs and like all the slow motion like bullet shots, going through the wagon, but he's not getting hit at all. And I was like, what are we doing here? Like, it just like, I don't know. It didn't work for me at all. It felt kind of silly. And it took a lot of the wind out of the happenings for me dramatically.
I think that's totally fair. And you're right. That is the climax of the film. And so Stone gets his moment to shine, as you need in this sort of ensemble film, where basically like there's one goon left, one goon in the bookkeeper. So the goon is holding the bookkeeper hostage, and he's like, I'm walking out of here, and like, you are not going to follow me or I'll fucking kill this guy. And so Ness, like, oh, it's so cold as ice. I loved it. Like, you see like the character turning a corner. He basically tells Stone, he's like, Stone's like kind of laying on the ground with holding his gun. He's like, Stone, do you have the shot? Stone's like, I've got it. And he's like, okay, do it. And Stone just boom, headshots this guy.
Boom! Headshot!
And they have the bookkeeper. So after that, we're in court. It's finally happening. The bookkeeper is testifying, and he says he'll flip on Capone. And Capone's yawning. He's like, doesn't care about this at all. They don't understand, like, why is he so cavalier about this? And the main goon is there and indicates, like, shows, like, reveals that he's holding a gun, and Ness is pissed about this. So he tells the bailiff or whoever, he's like, get this guy out of here. And he follows him out. So they have a little confrontation verbally outside of the courtroom, and Ness takes main goon's matchbook to light a cigarette, because you could smoke back then in a courthouse, and sees the address
100 years ago.
Yeah. So he sees Connery's address, and he goes, I used to have a friend who lived there, and main goon taunts Ness about Connery, and that's it. That's all it takes. And I don't blame Ness for this at all. So like, Ness and main goon, like, they get into just a chase sequence, firefight. They're running on the roof of the courthouse building, and the main goon, it ends with main goon. He's like trying to climb down, but like can't really do it. And so he has to climb back up, and Ness is waiting for him. So they get like Ness saves him, and it seems like maybe he'll, bring main goon to justice and like arrest him. But main goon, he taunts Ness about Connery, and Ness takes that personally and pushes or throws main goon off the roof of the building, like down 7 stories onto a car. And that's it. Main goon is dead.
Another slow-mo shot here that really didn't work for me.
I liked it. I don't mind it if it is used sparingly, like the way Zack Snyder uses it. I don't think is good. But this, I think it worked, because like this guy, like main goon, like we've spent the entire movie really hating this guy, and so to see him get his comeuppance,
such a hateable face.
Oh, absolutely, great, yep. Like gangster actor face. To like, it's like, I think we needed that like release. We needed to see him just free fall for like 10 seconds and then just boom, see the aftermath. But anyways, main goon's dead. We're back in the courtroom. Turns out we learn that, oh shit, Stone reveals to Ness, the entire jury has been tampered. Like, they've all been bribed, and Capone's going to walk. So they're going to lose this case due to this meddling. So Ness basically talks to the judge about this, has everyone leave the room in the judge's chambers. And so tell me if I misinterpreted this, but what I thought happened here was that the judge was like, Ness is saying like, you got to do something about this. You got to like change the jury or something like that. And the judge is like, why the hell would I do that? And Ness bluffs and says that the judge's name was in the ledger. Okay. Yes. Yeah. So, and he wasn't, but exactly. The judge, yeah. So the judge makes this late game decision to swap the jury for the Capone case with a jury in a different part of the courthouse, just completely swap them. And Capone is pissed about this. Capone's lawyer immediately pleads guilty, and Capone punches the guy in the face, and it's a media frenzy. I just hit my microphone. There's a media frenzy, and like everyone's going crazy. There's commotion in the courthouse. Capone literally has to be held back because he's just raging, violently raging. And that's it. Like, Capone, he has been convicted. He's going away. And now we're in kind of that, the end of the film. Ness, we see Ness, he's reading in newspaper headlines about the Untouchables. We're getting some exposition through the newspaper headlines. Capone was sentenced to 11 years. And we get this, wistful, kind of sad scene of Ness looking at the photo of the Untouchables when they were at that restaurant, back when they were all alive. And he says, so much violence, as he packs his suitcase. And he looks inside his desk and he sees the pendant or the key, whatever, the necklace that he took from Connery after Connery passed. Stone comes in and says goodbye to Ness, says he's going to miss it. and Ness hands Connery's necklace to Stone. It's a touching moment, and they part ways. So Ness is walking out. A reporter asks, hey, they're going to repeal Prohibition. What are you going to do? And Ness, he jokes. He says, "I'll have a drink when that happens." And he walks away, in downtown Chicago. And that is the end of The Untouchables.
Great recap.
Yeah.
You did a wonderful job today.
Oh, thanks, man. Yep. So let's get into those final judgments. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just make some comments about that final part of the movie. Right. There's so much about this that's untrue. So I just want to share a little bit of this context. So none of this happened, right? This like courtroom drama, and ultimately, what brought Capone down wasn't, the introduction of a ledger and the testimony of somebody who understood that ledger. But it was actually a realization that Capone had in the late 20s that, he kind of fucked up not paying his income tax for a few years. And so he had an attorney, have some meetings with the IRS, wherein he disclosed some information about his recent income. But that process was never concluded. So he'd made some disclosures about having made money that he hadn't paid taxes on. And those disclosures were the basis for the case that was brought against him. So this is so sensationalized, and it's fun. It's fun storytelling. But the way that Capone was actually brought down was really boring and uninteresting.
Yes.
In the way that so many of those things I think end up being in reality.
Yeah, I read some trivia about the film after watching it and was surprised to see that apparently Capone, a smart guy, he actually never committed any violence against the Untouchables because he knew that killing a Prohibition agent would lead to more trouble. So he tried to buy them. He tried to buy them off, but it didn't work. But yeah, obviously I don't think that would work as well for this film, this sort of story.
I thought that was there's another thing about it that was a little silly to me, was the kind of manufactured drama of what might have happened if Ness had pulled a gun on Capone and his thugs in the hotel lobby. It's I don't know, man. I don't think they would have killed him. It's it's a dozen witnesses,
Right.
You're going to kill a federal agent, in a hotel lobby. I think Al Capone was pretty smart, pretty disciplined.
Yeah.
I don't think that Ness would ever have actually been in any danger there in the hotel lobby. Certainly no more than than he was just ambiently in his life, given that he was investigating him. I think that if a big shot gangster wants to kill somebody, they're not going to do it themselves in a crowded hotel lobby. But that's just the movies for you. What are you going to do?
Them's the movies. So
Yep,
let's get into it. What did you think of The Untouchables overall?
Oh yeah. So, I love this movie. I don't think it's perfect. For me, rating wise, I'm thinking probably 4 stars. I think it's quite good. I think it's really flawed. But I really enjoyed it. It was one of those rare, you don't do this, but I do. I look at how far I am into a movie all the time while I'm watching it.
Oh no.
And
thank you.
every time I looked, I was like, we're already that far. This is going by so fast. It was so much fun. It carries you so well through it. I was never bored for the entire film. It was just a ball. You didn't comment on this. I thought that you would. Something that I love about this film is how sentimental it is. I love sentimentality. I really love the score. I think that it's so sappy and overly emotional, and I think that it's the way the sound mix is done, it really prominently features the score from a volume perspective in a way that it just takes up a lot of space when the music is playing, and it feels like it's really kind of manipulating you in a way that I don't know. I feel like you generally don't like, but I actually do enjoy. So I loved the score, and I loved how sappy it all was. We commented on this earlier. Definitely could have been 20 or 30 minutes longer. There's a lot that I think is left unexplored, and some of it works, right? I think, as we remarked on earlier, it's cool how Stone and Malone's characters are not explicitly explained by the text of the script. I think that's really, really cool. But to your point, I think that there's lost opportunity for chemistry between Costner and De Niro, as Ness and Capone. I think there's lost opportunity to sort of deepen the chemistry and emotional bonds that are depicted between the Untouchables a little bit to make the deaths that ultimately happen even more tragic. And I think to make like what we're supposed to perceive as Ness's turn, which we can talk a little bit more about, feel a little bit more earned by what happens in the film. So that's a flaw in it for me. And then, for me, I like to try to figure out like what the point of a story is, like what is the vantage point on the world. And that's where this like really falls down for me. Like, is it supposed to be satirical? Like, I think no, because of how saccharine and like sappy and emotionally manipulative everything about it is. And so if it's not supposed to be satirical, then like, what's the vantage point here? It's like, do we really believe in this like very simple black and white, like good and evil narrative? And are we really supposed to find the character of Ness, who is depicted as like totally amoral, like whose only motivation is just to uphold like whatever the rules are, whatever they may be? Because like to your comment, right, at the end, he's like, guess I'll have a drink as soon as Prohibition's over. And it's like, I think a lot of people feel that way about the world, like have that kind of like relatively unreflective, adherence to current norms. And like, that's fine. But it's like, it's not very interesting to be depicted in a way that doesn't seem to have anything to say about it. And then it's like, Ness has his turn, I guess. He's like a little radicalized by the things that he sees. And like, I don't really know what De Palma and Mamet want us to think about that either. Like, it's all a little muddy to me thematically in a way that I find odd. I feel like there's a lot of thematic clarity in both Greetings and Ezra, which we watched before this, and those movies are both pretty fucking stupid. But like, I think that I can understand like what observations the creative folks were trying to make in those earlier films, and I just didn't see it here. So like for me, like I love this movie. I think it's like technically pretty masterful, but it's got some stuff that like keeps it from like the 4.5+ star ratings that I would really give to something that I think is like perfect or near perfect. What did you think of this film?
Yeah, so surprisingly, I agree with you entirely. And I'm just surprised because I feel like we've seen 3 films so far, and I'm just surprised that we're so synced up on the ratings and overall feelings. For me, this is, I think in terms of the overall quality of the movie, like I was trying to decide between a 3.5 and a 4, and I think I settled on 4 stars for this, 4 out of 5. And for the reasons that you mentioned. So it's, to me, in the way that De Palma, I think, is, it's very concerned with style over substance. So yes, I like that it was 2 hours long. I liked the tight pacing. I had the same feeling. It was like I was never bored during this, and it was just a very fun, stylish, kind of crime movie that I really enjoy. Like the whole aspect of putting the team together, the whole whatever, cops versus robbers, good versus evil narrative, like all the period piece aspect of it in American history, all that's really fun. So I did really like it. But yes, what prevents it from reaching 4.5 or 5 stars for me is what you said, that it honestly, I almost never say this, but I think it should have been a little longer because we didn't really get to flesh out Capone as a character. We had so little time for him, and De Niro plays the role very well with the little bit of time that he's allotted, but we barely get a glimpse into his life, his characterization, like who he is beyond just the his violent tendencies and
cartoon bad guy.
Exactly. And same thing for Ness, where you're totally right. I thought to myself as I was watching this movie and afterwards, well, what is this movie trying to say? Because you're right, when it comes to the dynamic between the protagonist and antagonist, there's no real budding of ideals. It's just, Ness is loyal to the letter of the law. And, it's indicated that he's morally pure. He has a family and a wife and a kid, and he's Christian. And then you have Capone, who we spend a few minutes with, and he's, angry and violent and beats a guy.
People to death with baseball bat.
Exactly. But like beyond that, it's a film that seems totally disinterested with like saying anything beyond that. It doesn't seem to have anything to offer, from a thematic perspective about that time period, or how, that's a reflection of the then current time period. And, when the film was filmed, and I was like, okay, like this is fun. It's great. It's straightforward, but yeah, there's just nothing, at that next level. There was nothing deeper there. And so, I really enjoyed it. I had a blast. Certainly my favorite of the 3 films that we've seen for this podcast so far. But yeah, I think that's what prevented it from like achieving true greatness. So I'm landing on a 4 as well.
Yeah. You want to talk a little bit about De Niro's performance? I think it's wasted, right? I think it's exceptional. And I think he's given so little to do with like the kind of the scale, the enormity of his commitment to the role. So here's some things about it, right? So I wondered about the baldness, right? He shaved his head. So he like shaved that like particular type of like male pattern baldness into his hair for the depiction. He also, I think he carries it well because he's such a good looking guy, but he gained 30 pounds for the role.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's like he was really, really committed to this. And, I think the person of Al Capone, like, listen, I'm not like a violent crime apologist. Like, that's not like what I'm trying to do here. But like the person of Al Capone, I think had like a richness to his character. And there was, I think, a lot of complexity to it. Like, I think that he did try to do some good in the world around him. Like, possibly solely as a hedge, right, against the bad marketing of being a violent criminal. But he wasn't just a violent criminal.
Right.
And I think that the ways that he is depicted as being violent in this film are like, there's something to express skepticism about. Like there is no actual documentation in the historical record of him like being personally violent in this way. And it reads to me as being like, to your comment, right? Like we really want to like paint these characters as like black and white as we possibly can. Like the upstanding Christian who's like motivated by family and like upholding order in the law versus like this nut job who's like beating people to death with a baseball bat. And it's like, I'm happy Al Capone went to prison. He was a terrible guy. But like, I think an interesting story would depict like some of the dynamism and like the like complex moral dimensions of folks who find themselves on opposite ends of conflict. And like this film does none of that. It's like it's really disappointing because like everybody involved has the capacity to do those things. Like this is like it's like a technical achievement, this film. It's so good. But it's ultimately pretty hollow in a way that drags it down to your point.
Yes. Super cool film, kind of simple narratively. But I think it's a great place to leave our discussion of The Untouchables. Mike, is there any film that you would want to recommend instead of or in addition to watching The Untouchables?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this as you and me discussed at the top of the pod. As has been my custom for the past 2 weeks, I totally forgot to think about this. Our whole discussion about what's left said and unsaid about characters and how the runtime of a film can affect its quality if it's trying to be an epic, in a way that can be counterintuitive, right? Most movies are too long, but epics need to be long, and it's a bummer when they're too short. Made me think of another epic that I really loved that I've watched in the past year that I think could have stood to be 30 minutes longer. The Iron Claw with Zac Efron.
Oh yeah, great film.
I agree. I think it's really something very special. And the only thing that kind of drags it down is just the fact that it's got an ensemble cast and a lot of the actors and characters aren't given enough time to really flesh themselves out and to explore some more complex interpersonal dynamics between more sets of characters, because it's I think it's like 2 hours and 15 minutes long, and it's one of those like sprawling intergenerational epics that could really stand to be 3 hours long. And similarly, this is a crime epic that easily could have stood to be 2.5 to 3 hours long, and I think it would have been a lot stronger for it. I think it could have found time to like have more to say and to be paced in a way that feels a little bit more natural if it had that space. So that's my recommendation this week.
That's a great one. That's a great film. One of the best films that I watched in 2024. My recommendation, I'm going a little different of a direction here. I was thinking, just about the time period in which The Untouchables was set, and it made me think about this other film that I didn't watch when it came out originally, but watched for the first time a couple of years ago and was pleasantly surprised by it. I think I was pleasantly surprised by it because my expectations were so low based on the discourse about the film. So my recommendation is Public Enemies, which is a 2009 gangster film directed by Michael Mann. So this stars Johnny Depp as the famous Depression era bank robber John Dillinger, and basically, narratively, this is your more traditional length for this sort of film. It's almost 2.5 hours long, and so half the story you're following John Dillinger. And you're like basically following him like through, he's such a charismatic bank robber. He's captured the kind of heart of the American public. And then the other half of the film, you're watching the fledgling FBI, try to take him down. So you watch J. Edgar Hoover basically assign Melvin Purvis, who's played by Christian Bale, the task of bringing Dillinger down dead or alive. So it's one of these, just classic kind of crime narratives where you're sympathetic to both characters on both sides, kind of in the same way as Heat. Obviously it's no Heat, but in that sort of way where we get time on both sides of the conflict, and it just makes it feel so much more tragic when of course, Dillinger eventually gets his comeuppance. And so I think this received a pretty lukewarm reception when it came out. And I think a lot of it had to do with the way at which it was shot. So you haven't seen this film, right?
No, I have not. Yep.
So it's one of these later period Michael Mann digitally shot films. And I thought it was really fascinating because when I saw the trailers for it back in 2008 or whatever, I thought, oh, this looks really ugly. It looks like, someone's home movies. But when I actually watched the film, compared to The Untouchables, which has such dramatic, lighting and cinematography and these really creative, could only happen in movies kind of shots, like the split diopter stuff. Public Enemies, it's filmed, so not flatly, but in this digital way that's so realistic that it almost, to me, it gave it this sense of hyper reality where I was kind of blown away by how immersive it felt, because it felt like I'm actually in this world with these characters, seeing. Obviously, all the sets are dressed, it takes place in I think the early 1930s, shortly after when The Untouchables is set. But it's being able to see that world, but through the lens of modern filmmaking techniques, it really made me feel like I was there in a way that when you watch more traditionally, shot on film kind of gangster films, it just felt so different and unique. And I really liked that aspect of it. So, it's not my favorite film in the world, but I think it is quite good, and I think it is slept on. So I'm recommending Public Enemies.
There you go. I added it to my watch list. Looks nice.
Yeah, listen, it's Michael Mann. You can't go wrong with Michael Mann. I know, right? So I think that brings us to the final section here. It's your turn, Mike. It's your turn to roll our next. Keep in mind, I rolled The Untouchables, so I feel like I have a pretty good hit rate so far. Let's see what Mike the Fab rolls. Do you have the dice ready?
All right, I'm hitting it. Are you ready?
All right, I'm ready. I'm nervous, but I'm ready.
All right, we have gotten 70, which is Righteous Kill from 2008.
Oh God help us. Just I don't know anything about this film, but knowing that it's a De Niro film from 2008 really gives me pause.
That's not good.
Oh Lord.
He is the top billed star, which is exciting. It's
that
De Niro
really
and
nice.
Pacino. I don't know. It's got a
I was going to say you did a great job of introducing that. Okay, as a little teaser for next episode, this is a 2008 American crime thriller starring Robert De Niro and Al Pacino as New York City Police Department detectives on the hunt for a serial killer. I think nothing else needs to be said. Listen, sounds like it's not going to be very good, but I'm excited to see these two titans of cinema together again.
It's got a pretty incredible cast.
Yeah.
De Niro, Pacino, Carla Gugino, John Leguizamo, 50 Cent. Sterling K. Brown.
Oh my God, 50 Cent.
This is quite the cast. I mean, listen, it's gonna at least be fun. Merritt Weaver's in it. Love Merritt Weaver.
I think it could be fun to get some early aughts cinema in here.
Yeah, this is gonna be good. I'm excited about this one. Okay,
Me
it's
too.
only a tight 101 minutes long.
That's
beautiful.
Great, man. Oh,
beautiful. Yeah.
I might watch that in bits in between Sopranos talks.
Oh yeah, and watch it on your phone like Lips does. Shout out Lips.
Shout out to Lips if you're listening. Well, that's great. I mean, there we go. That's our next film. It's another episode of Our Hero De Niro in the Books. I would like to thank some people and do some plugs and wrap this bad boy up. We somehow hit an hour and a half, so I don't think removing the cold open actually helped that much. But first of all, if you're not following us on Letterboxd yet, please do. Our accounts are Mike Back At You and Mike the Fab. We're going to be chronicling all of this Our Hero De Niro stuff on there, so definitely check it out. Also, if you have any sort of feedback, thoughts, prayers, etc., please email us at ourherodeniro@gmail.com. We're going to be checking that. Maybe someday we'll get a listener and actually have something to respond to. Also, we're 3 episodes deep now, and just remember that we should probably encourage anyone who is listening to the sounds of our voice right now to leave a positive review for us on Apple Podcasts, because, I don't know, everyone says that seems to matter. And it's certainly a quick and easy way it could help this Odyssey become a little more popular. And I think the last thing is just to thank Mike, your wife Caroline, for this incredible podcast artwork. We pre-recorded. We recorded a couple episodes before the artwork was finalized, but we have some really fantastic art here. I love it. I think it's very exciting. It makes me want to. I think we need to make sure that the quality of the podcast lives up to the artwork. It sets a standard for us that I think we need to kind of rise up to. So I think that's great. I have nothing else.
There's a beautiful aspirationalism to it. I
there you
agree.
go.
That's
yeah.
really nice. Yeah.
And you say I'm not an optimist. No one has a more positive outlook on life than I do. That's all I have. Do you have anything else?
No, I don't have anything. I just thank you everybody for listening. Thanks, Mike. It was a great discussion today. I had a lot of fun watching this film, and I'm so excited to discuss Righteous Kill next week.
It's fun talking about fun movies. Yeah, that sounds great. We'll see you next week with another episode of Our Hero De Niro.